Raw. Today's guest is Cody Brothers. Cody is a professional photographer, and he also owns and operates a photo lab in Santa Fe, New Mexico with his wife, Nicole. I'm your host, Ann Kelly. If this is your first time watching, you might be wondering who I am. That's fair. So in a nutshell, I am someone that has been obsessed with art, music, really anything creative most of my life. About 20 years ago, I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico to go to art school and further immerse myself in the arts. And I've now been working in the gallery world in Santa Fe for about 15 years now. If you'd like to know more, there's an interview with me that I did for Lens Scratch in the description. So if you want to know probably way more than you want to know, you can find that information there. In the meantime, thank you for watching. And I'm pleased to introduce you to my friend, Cody. Thanks for joining us, Cody.
Yeah, good to be here.
Where are you today?
I'm up in Cedar Lake, Colorado, in a cabin that my aunt left to us. I've been a photographer now since, first camera I was given was from my grandfather when I was like 10. And it was because he had a brand new Canon AE1. We went on a trip and he couldn't figure out how to work it and basically handed it to me. And with a manual and over the trip, I figured it out. I used to draw and paint as a kid. By being able to take photographs, I could draw and paint from the photographs. So that was the avenue of how I started shooting pictures. And I never thought I would be a professional photographer. I did it because I enjoyed it so much. That's how I started working in labs. And it was to process my own film, to use the darkroom to print my own photos. I just had a huge interest in it. I had an instructor while I was in art school tell me, he asked me one day where I got my inspiration for my drawing, for my illustrations. And I told him that I took photographs. And he asked to see my portfolio of photographs. I was like, well, I just have the photographs. I don't really have a portfolio. He said, bring in some of your photographs. So I brought him in and he said, you're going to be a much better photographer than you're ever going to be an illustrator. So that was the changing point.
I had done a little research before this conversation. It sounded like you had spent a fair amount of time in art school, specifically studying drawing and painting.
I was on my last semester.
Yeah.
He said I should concentrate more on that. And at that point, I was working, doing layout for the newspaper in Orlando, in Florida. It was before, I'd gone to art school for design and illustration, and I was working, doing setup and layout. And that was before the computers were rolled in. That was still when you're doing amber lift, cutout, and the whole bit. And, letter-set letters and all those things. I mean, when they rolled in the computers, they wanted me to go back to school for the computer. And I hate computers as much as I do. And I've always have. I've had a thing about it to where it used to be I'd touch one and it would shut down, basically. When they said that was the thing that made up my mind, look, I'm going to go find a job in a lab and start working in labs so I can get my film processed so I could use the dark rooms. And that's kind of how it all started. And once I got working in labs and learning each and every little part of it, it was kind of a natural at some point that Nicole and I were like, look, why don't we just get our own place and run our own place? And then that way I can concentrate more on my stuff. We worked in commercial labs. Most of the time I worked in large commercial labs. So
prior to owning Visions?
Yeah, we did artist work, but it was rare. It wasn't near as what we do at Vision. We did large contracts for Coca-Cola, Ford, the big companies for trade shows and stuff like that. Very rarely did you do artist work because most of the guys that owned the labs that I worked for didn't want the maintenance of dealing with an artist. When we decided to move on from what we were doing and buy our own place, Santa Fe was a natural. I wanted to move home. I'm originally from New Mexico. I'd always thought about moving home. And one of the things was at the time when we were working at commercial labs, I had gotten so inundated in working that I was rarely shooting. The only time I would photograph was when I was on holiday. And most of the time when we were on vacation, we were coming to the Southwest. We were coming to the Four Corners, coming to see my family who lived up in Farmington, or Nicole's family who lived outside of Denver. So that was when I was photographing the most. So when we decided to move on and buy the lab there in Santa Fe, that was a big part of it, is servicing the art community, doing meaningful. It's not just cookie cutter work like the commercial labs. You have much more of a quality control, detailed oriented thing. In doing that, you know, it gave me a lot of opportunity to start working on my own stuff more. Bought a camera when we bought the lab, bought a camera that I'd always had my eye on, a panoramic camera. At the time was using a 35 millimeter camera and piecing together shots. I would print individual shots in the darkroom and then stitch it together to make the panoramic scene to where they would actually be one of kind of David Hockney-ish. You know, his photography is very much like that. That was one of the things included in the business loan, was to be able to get some new equipment for me and get me into a bigger format and see what I could do. It all kind of started when I did a huge exhibition for a client that was going to New York City, to a gallery in New York City. He wanted me to print it, mount it, finish it, and drive it to New York and install it.
Wow, that's a lot.
I did the whole thing, boxed all the pieces, wrapped them all up, took him to New York, got to the gallery. She let us stay there at the gallery that night so we could hang everything. And she had like blow up beds for us and the whole thing. Hung the show. After I'd hung the show, she started to quiz me. Well, you printed these, you mounted them. Well, you have to be an artist yourself. And I was like, well, I'm a photographer. And she goes, well, have you ever shown anybody your work? And I was like, no. And that was she asked that I come back after the show and bring my portfolio, fly back and stay with her and show her my portfolio. And that's kind of how it all started. She immediately said, I want to represent you. I've been represented by her since. And that was kind of the start of it. And then after I got represented there in New York, I came back to Santa Fe, and it was just like immediately someone wanted to show my work there. And that led to my relationship with Bobby, Bobby Beals, and Bobby asking me to show at his gallery, Beals and Abate, when that was open up on Canyon. And that just kind of took off. First week I sold 2 pieces. So it was like one of those things, well, I guess I need to be a lot more focused on the possibilities that it could bring. It's been great.
Well, I love this whole story generally of how you were pursuing painting and drawing, and then it naturally just kind of turned into photography, which is something you'd always been doing. And
yeah, it was
working in labs to kind of get that education, and then now you're running your own lab. And
it's a thing that either you're an academically taught photographer or self-taught. The greatest thing of being a self-taught photographer, of working in labs, I was constantly, most everyone that works in labs is a photographer at some point or some way. They just are. They're bit by the bug of it, and they have to be around it. So they work in labs. You are always being able to bounce things off people, whether it's a printer, guy processing. Always say, wow, how do you do this? And you're seeing so many other people's work. You have all kinds of not only inspiration, but ideas of how you want your work to look. Because you have all these examples from the most amateur to the highest professional and everything in between, of all these different styles, of all these different captures, compositions, all those things. It's just, you're constantly learning by doing and seeing, whereas it seemed like academically you're being told how to do it. And working in labs and doing it for so long, you develop a style. You develop a style of printing, you develop a style of seeing, kind of a taste of what appeals to you, whether it be how someone likes their prints. Some people like flat printed prints that are very old school, printed almost flat and just kind of washed out looking, or more graphic, hard edged, contrasty.
You shoot all film, which I admire. When you're shooting film, particularly large and medium format film, you might only have one or two shots when you go out to shoot that. So it's very different than, nothing against digital, but when you're going to shoot some 8x10 film, you're not just going to shoot, and then look at it later.
You can only carry so many film holders. That's
Right.
the whole thing that blows people away, especially, with these shooting in national parks like I do. Perfect example, Death Valley's Zabriskie Point, first thing in the morning or the last thing in the, the sun going down. You have all these professional photographers, amateur photographers, all on this point lined up. 98% of them are digital. So they're just at times just holding the button down. I mean, it's truly just one capture after another, after another, after another, after another, thinking that one out of those hundreds is the perfect exposure, or it's going to be HDR together with 10 other ones.
Right.
That mentality is just so far from what a film photographer is trying to pull off. I'm always looking for the perfect exposure. I want the exposure to be so perfect that I lay it down, make a contact, and that's pretty much it. Darker, lighter, more contrast, there it is. In doing that, you have to be good with your technique with a camera, but you also have to know the great thing about being able to process your own film, to balance exposures based on, the light, how you shot it. If you overexposed it, then you can pull it in the processing to balance it all out. All those things that's the art form that is film photography. Now it seems like with digital, it's all about editing, because you shoot so many images that you're constantly editing. When you shoot film, you make a contact, you look at your contact, and when you're shooting large format like 4:5, well, a 4:5 page holds 4 4:5s. You make a contact, you're looking at 4 images at a time.
You're still making decisions of,
oh yeah,
maybe they're all very similar. Maybe the cloud's a little different, the light, the shadows.
You have to be more choosy. Like I said, you can only carry so many film holders. You can only carry so many rolls of 120. That's the biggest difference I see between the two. I had a guy in Shenandoah the other day. I was shooting an 8x10 pinhole.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, well, why would you want to do that? And I get it all the time.
Yeah.
And I have to explain to him, well, it's such the opposite of what you're getting. That's why I still do it. And refining that form, like the whole thing about pinhole, and I've been doing pinhole seriously now for about 8-9 years. And it's just...
So for people who are not familiar with pinhole, can you briefly explain
well,
that?
it's the original means of capture. It's just a box with a tiny hole in the front, and you're shooting onto a piece of film or paper. There's Homer.
Is that your parrot?
Yeah, he's copying me now. Yeah, he's good boy. he's up there on his perch here. Let's see if you can see him. There he is, little green fellow up there.
Yeah, I think we might need to introduce Homer.
If I keep him on there too long, he'll just start nibbling on my hair and my ears. Like the pinhole I'm using for the project I'm doing right now is a 4:5. It's 4:5 film holders and just a tiny little hole in the front, and that's your means of light source. I of course have modified it to filter, have a red filter on it so I get more contrasty black and white. I've done it to where I have some that are set up to shoot infrared, so I have an infrared filter over the whole, thus making the exposures even longer. Pinhole is just such a different world from the digital world that's going on. And that's
the opposite, right?
It's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And this project that I've been doing over this year is a repeat of what I did in 2012, except I'm doing it with a 4:5 instead of medium format Last time I shot with a 6.9. This time I'm shooting with a 4.5. And I've shot a picture every day this year, at least one.
And that first time you did that project, you did 366 days?
Yeah, it was the leap year.
Okay. I was wondering why not 365. So
yeah, it was the leap year, and we had one this last year.
And so every year, every day of that year, you went out and shot a pinhole photograph.
At least one.
Mm-hmm. At least one.
Most of the time, two to four. Right. Some days it was just one, the weather, or because of how hard we were working. There were complete days to where I was so short on time. There was days that, wow, I've got 15 minutes of light left. I got to find something to shoot. Walk down the alley of outside my studio, which is right next to the brewery, and there's always something bizarre in the alley. One day it might be a tire that was left there, a bicycle tire or something with the light catching it. So, you know, there were many days that it was something like that where you had to come up with something.
And for those who are not familiar, an exposure for a pinhole camera could be 15 minutes to an hour. So if you only have 15 minutes of light left during the day, but sometimes that forces you to look at something you might have overlooked.
All the time. Mm-hmm. All the time. The project in 2012 taught me was to go with something this time a little bit more versatile. 2012, I shot all infrared. I shot the whole project in infrared. This year, I've shot most of it in just straight up black and white, mostly with Tri-X film. Tri-X or FP4. It's shortened my exposure times, so I don't have to be standing somewhere like I used to for 15 minutes to 30 minutes to get an exposure. So it's made things a little bit more accessible and versatile. I went from shooting pretty much 90 to 85% infrared to shooting probably now about 40, 50%.
What was it about the infrared?
When I first started shooting infrared was for drawing. Mm-hmm. I had my cousin introduced it to me. One time when we were in Texas, we were out shooting a bunch of herd of cows out in this field, and the field was just lush green. And he goes, try shooting this film and see what it looks like. And he goes, it's going to make your sky black, and it's going to give you those clouds like the paintings, the dolly paintings you like. And he goes, it's going to make all that grass white. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he handed me a roll of HIE, and I put it in and shot it. And I got these pictures that were like, wow, this is exactly the way I want to draw or paint. I want this dream world, because I was very influenced at the time, still am, by Salvador Dali. Dreamy, surrealist, different world, but yet real, realistic looking, photographic. That always got me. And then I'm a big U2 fan. Cover of Unforgettable Fire is Slaying Castle with the infrared, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, that's what I see in my head and what I'm trying to draw. So that was very influential.
Well, it was U2 actually changed the direction of your life.
Completely changed my life. I was always a big fan through high school. I mean, I listened to him from the outset, and all my boys that I ran with, we were all metalheads. I mean, like big time metalheads, and AC/DC, Iron Maiden, the whole deal. And when I started listening to U2, they were like, "What the hell are you listening to?" And I was like, "There's something about these guys I just really like," and they just never understood. By the time I got to college, Unforgettable Fire came out. I think it was 85, and it was my first year in college. I had gone to military high school from sophomore until I graduated. Was sent when I was a sophomore by my mother and my grandfather. They wanted me. My grandfather's dream was for me to go to the Naval Academy. He sent me to a Naval Academy preparatory school, basically. And when I graduated, I had several appointments, Naval Academy being one, but I was also offered to go to West Point. So when we went and visited all the schools, I basically had the choice, which service academy do you want to go to? And it was like, well, the one that impressed me was West Point, so I went to West Point. Well, I was very conflicted about going to begin with. And then as I got there, I was like, I really don't belong here. I really don't want to be here. I was really conflicted sophomore year after spring break. I was wondering, do I stay? Do I leave? Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I used to listen to New York radio. The Howard Stern, it was like something 101 in New York. And I was studying one night and they came on and said, well, we have the new U2 album. We're going to play it in its entirety at midnight. So I got all my studying done, put my headphones on, waiting, and the Joshua Tree. And it was just like the very first lyric, the very first song is Where the Streets Have No Name. And the lyrics to it, just right then at that moment, I knew I was going to leave West Point. I mean, at that moment, as soon as I heard the lyrics to the song, said everything. Had finals at the end of May. Went and saw U2 the week before in the Meadowlands. I ended up following them that summer after I left West Point. Saw them another 4 times. I've seen them 40 times since.
Nice.
Yeah. They've always been there at every change in my life. That's in some way or another. In every transition in my life, they've had some point in it. Very inspirational.
I had the opportunity to see them once in the 90s, see them in Denver.
In the old Mile High?
Yeah, I think it was the Mile High. I also got to see Pink Floyd in that same stadium.
Yeah, I saw Pink Floyd there.
Last tour was 1994.
Nicole and I were there.
You were there? Okay, I was there.
Nicole and I met at a lab there in Denver at that time.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know.
That's where we actually met. I lived in Denver from, 93 to 97.
Okay. So we were there at the same time. I moved to Santa Fe in 98. And on episode 1 of Artintheraw, my first ever guest, Michael Kirschoff, who's also a film shooting photographer, we figured out we both went to that 1994 Pink Floyd tour, only he went, I think, a month later in LA.
Right.
And we both found our concert ticket stubs. And I think we both paid like $20 some to go to that show. And
which would be like $400 now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. The recent U2 tickets I've seen have been, in the hundreds. So
luckily I've been a fan club member for so long that we get priority when tickets go on sale. I always get a floor ticket for like $50.
That's how it should be.
When they did the Joshua Tree tour in 2017, we went to 3 shows, and we went to, we saw them in Dallas, and then we saw them in New York, and we saw the last show in San Diego.
And Joshua Tree is somewhere I've always wanted to go. I haven't made it yet.
It's a special place. I'm actually trying for the residency there this year. The coolest thing about Joshua Tree National Park is not, they got this overabundance, great collection of trees, but what makes it different than just other places you see Joshua trees is the rock formations there. The rock formations there are fantastic. It's a great park. Easy to get lost in that place as far as like get away from people. One of my favorite parks.
And you photographed in a lot of national parks.
Yes. Shenandoah was my first one back on Northeast Coast that I've gotten a chance to photograph for an extended period of time.
Right. What was your most recent residency?
Yeah, it was Shenandoah.
Mm-hmm.
The other one I did this past year was Death Valley, and Death Valley to me is just it's my favorite. Prior to that, it was Joshua Tree. Death Valley is just it's probably the most unique place I know of on the face of the earth. In the same day, you can be minus 200 feet sea level all the way up to 11,000 feet in the mountains. You can go through that complete terrain in a few hours. And that's unique to that place, I think. It's just the thing about Death Valley is most all the photography you've seen from Death Valley, with the exception of Edward Weston, is color. And it's because Death Valley is so colorful. The natural colors of the ores in the rock are just so dramatic that everyone shoots color. You don't see anyone shoot black and white there. You've seen tons of black and white imagery from Joshua Tree. The challenge there is to do something different. Stuff I've shot at Joshua Tree has been almost exclusively infrared. Makes all the needles on the trees go white and just really emphasizes the contrast that's naturally there.
And you've done a number of residencies over the years. How did you go about doing the first one?
The thing about the residency is anytime you're allowed to be somewhere for more than a week at a time, it really allows yourself to be absorbed and be a part of it. It's invaluable. They don't pay a lot, but they give you, most of the time free lodging. Most of those places, like for example, Death Valley and Shenandoah, if you're paying for that room, you're paying somewhere between $200 and $300 a night, and you're in a residency there from 3 to 5 weeks. Well, you do the math. That in itself is a great opportunity, because you're right in the middle of the park. You're in a place to where in both locations, I set up dark rooms either in the bathroom or in the closet to be able to change my 4.5 film out. It's a huge benefit to have a central location like that. Have a place where you can rest, recoup from hiking or whatever, and not sleeping on the ground every night like you would like in a campsite. It's invaluable to have that, that opportunity. And like I said, you just become immersed into the place that way. The difference between doing a residency and doing a vacation is when you're on a vacation, you go to a place like Death Valley, it's so big. You basically say, well, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. So you have over your stand takes a day to get there and a day back. So you're staying at the most 5 days. Well, there's only so many things you can do in 5 days. So you have to really start narrowing things down. Whereas a residency, I'm not just doing the things that are the big highlights of the park. You're doing things that are kind of off the beaten path. And that's usually where the gold is. The unexpected gem of a shot is when you start doing the things that are not, I'm in Death Valley, I have to do this one hike because that's the big hike to do. Or, and that was the thing in Shenandoah as well, everything was a hike. You either shot overlooks or you hiked to the place. And the overlooks are, they're where everybody's shooting, because everybody doesn't want to do the 5-mile hike and 1,500-foot elevation change. Well, that's where the gems are on those hikes, on those trails to those places most of the time. And Death Valley is the same way. The great thing about the residency in Death Valley, it fell at a good time in January, so it wasn't real hot. So it was easy to hike, to where I've been there anywhere close to summer and it's over 100 degrees automatically. And you really have to start thinking, okay, if I'm hiking 4 miles, how much water do I have to carry? Right. Along with all my film holders and all those things. So that changes things.
Did you bring a donkey?
The great thing about a residency, most of them, like the one in Death Valley, I was there for 5 weeks. Each week, I had someone fly out and assist me. So basically to carry equipment. And the big selling point was, okay, you're going to fly into Las Vegas. We're going to spend the night in Las Vegas. We're going to, go out to eat, have a good time. Then we're going to go in the park. We're going to work our butts off for 5 days. Then I'll take you back into Las Vegas. We'll have dinner and you can fly out the next day. And then I picked up the next guy. So everybody was like, okay, that's a great deal. Got a free place to stay. So they were my llamas and my donkeys. But it was invaluable. And in Shenandoah, they didn't allow that. They didn't want any assistance, any visitors at all. So I had to go solo. So the big thing there was scaling down equipment.
Right.
I did a hike the second day that I carried everything. And I learned right then and there on that, I was like, I can't carry this much. It's too much rock scrambling, too much stuff to be carrying 50-pound packs. Not having an assistant changed the way I shot. Like in Death Valley, you're driving so far from place to place. You got all the camera equipment in the car and you're going, okay, what am I taking on this hike? Just go to the car and get it. Where in Shenandoah, it was so much of a hike to get back to the car. You couldn't carry all that equipment.
And you've talked about shooting during ideal times of the—
No question. The biggest thing, you look at all the places that you want to go. Long way back to your question about what got me into residencies and what was attractive to me about it, and why Death Valley is because I had shot Death Valley for another project, for the endowment project for the 2016 centennial of the national parks. And that's when I first started shooting at Death Valley. So when I found out about the residency, I was like, well, yeah, I want to do a residency there because I know where everything's at. I've already scouted out almost all of it, because that's the big thing. A residency, if you've already been there, you have an idea of what times are good for what locations, and all that scouting stuff is already done. You're not spending all that time scouting. So you can pretty much say, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be here in the morning at sunrise. Then I'll take the middle of the day to scout out these places that I've never been, to find out, hey, when's a good time to be there, and then be somewhere you know of in the afternoon that you know, hey, this is going to be perfect for them. Those are the things that a residency allows you to do more. The time of day, knowing a location is invaluable when you're talking about, especially like Death Valley or Joshua Tree, because your good light lasts truly an hour. The light is so harsh in both of those places. That dramatic light only lasts for that right before the sun comes up to about an hour after, and then right before it goes down to about 30 minutes after. The rest of the day, it's just, you'll go and shoot, and you'll it's more of a sketchbook type thing is what I call it, to where you'll go and find locations, see compositions, kind of shoot, point and shoot type stuff to have an idea of what it's going to be like. That's the invaluable thing about a residency. If you find something you like, you say, okay, I need to be there at this time. I can wait until this, you have 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Well, there's got to be a day that the clouds are going to be good, or there's got to be a day to where it's going to be the right morning light or the right afternoon light.
So we're pretty lucky in Santa Fe with the quality of light that we have most days, would you say?
Oh, yeah.
Does that kind of keep you in Santa Fe beyond being there and owning a business there? And I was just hearing you talking about Death Valley maybe only having certain hour, very few hours of good light.
Santa Fe is a special place. When I was a kid growing up in Albuquerque, my mother used to take us up to Santa Fe. She was a big antique collector. At the time, back in the 70s, there was several antique shops along the plaza. So she would go up and just go from antique shop to antique shop. So we would come up to Santa Fe before the Canyon Road and the art galleries everywhere. It was much more local art, and it was just so different from anywhere else. Being from New Mexico, it's completely different than Farmington, where all my family was, and then Albuquerque, where we lived. It was, when we were talking about moving away, we were in Atlanta, and we were talking about buying a place, and the lab there in Santa Fe came up. It was like, wow, it's just kind of a godsend,
Yeah.
And the light there, especially between, I just think in October, there's something about late September, from like the middle of September to almost like the first week in November, the light in Santa Fe is just that angle and the shadow and the kind of golden quality of it is just, it's different. Long shadows, just has a different feel. We have really good air quality too,
We call it the magic light.
The adobe walls are part of it. And then, in the winter, when you have the mountain covered in snow and you have that bright light and the right sunset, and how it glows, it just lights up. I mean, the mountain will light up like a candle. You don't have many places that have that. We have really good air quality. It's like today here, sky was so clear and so incredibly blue that it's just like breathtaking. when you have that kind of light, you have that kind of air quality, the light's just so but you know, there's something to be said of talking about golden light. Los Angeles is nasty as the air quality is there. There's something about the quality of light there because of it, because of the filtration of the pollution. You it has a certain glow to it as well. Like when you watch outdoor sporting events or anything like that, the color of the glow there of that light in LA is unlike anywhere else. When the opportunity came to buy the lab there, it just was the only place really that I'll ever be able to follow this type of opportunity because of all the artists, how one, the photo mecca that Santa Fe is, and especially was when we first moved there. When we first bought the lab, we were still doing a lot of copy work for all the galleries. That's another thing that's like non-existent now. When back then we were doing all the, you know, transparencies for all the big galleries, you know, Gerald Peters, you know, the Mexico Museum of Art, all those places were shooting transparencies of their inventory. We were the ones processing it. We were the ones doing all that. At the time, it was a great way to get to know the community and get to know everybody.
Definitely.
You know,
and that's, I think, something we kind of have in common in a different way, where for me working for a gallery and you owning Visions, we have the opportunity to see work by so many different people.
No
just
question.
as part of our day job. That's just valuable and inspiring. And
No question. And being able to be a part of it, you know, like in my case, you know, a lot of the times people come in and say, hey, I have this idea. What can I do with it? Or what do you think about what's the best way I can make these look for an exhibition or a finish, you know, finishing it to look different than, you know, a normal matte and frame type situation. So it's cool to be a part of it. And especially when you go and you do a significant body of work for somebody and then you go to see their opening. It's cool to be a part of that. Not only knowing people, seeing so many different styles and different types of art, whether it be photography or painting or, you know, like I'm real good friends with Jono too. That's kind of how we became friends. Is he was like, well, you go out and shoot a lot of pictures. You mind if I tag along next time because I paint for my pictures? I'm like, yes, here, come on. And he goes, because I haven't been to, you know, a quarter of the places you've been. I want to just, and he goes, well, I'll carry your tripod or I'll carry your equipment just to be able to go with you and snap my own pictures to paint from. So like when he first started going out with me, you know, we became better and better friends. And then he created a whole body of work of just stuff he painted from the pictures that he from traveling with me. So that was kind of cool to see and kind of be a part of, and knowing that, hey, we were at the same place and here's what I did and here's the way he interpreted it. The big thing that I enjoy doing at work is trading with people. I have a whole gallery of artists from Santa Fe's work, and everyone that comes here is like, wow, this is like fantastic. And it's cool to be able to trade with people. I mean,
what a great way to collect work.
Oh man. Right. I mean, completely. Jono, I have a painting of Jono's here. When we went to the sand dunes, great sand dunes, I took him up there. He gave me a painting of me, and I'm like this big standing in front of the sand dunes with my backpack, with my camera. And in the painting's like a 30 by 40, and I'm about an inch tall, maybe. Every time I see it, reminds me of, you know, being there. And the one thing that I think that I'm always been real good at is creating projects for myself, like the Pinhole Project. I'm constantly photographing. I'm constantly still motivated to do that and make time to do that, so that it's to the point, like Nicole says now, I could stop photographing today and still not get to all the things that I've shot. Running a lab, doing other people's work, and try to be able to still do your own projects and do your own stuff, and to find those times, you know, it lags a little bit behind because of that. That's, you know, why I'm applying for this residency, hopefully in April in Joshua Tree. Fingers crossed I'll get it. The Pinhole Project, shooting a pinhole picture every day, that changed the project completely when we closed down, and all those things, you know, all the things that happened with the closures and everything like that. I started going around shooting empty patios at the restaurants. So I've got all these shots all over Santa Fe of like the empty brewery patio, the empty iconic patio, the empty, and the signs that were on the doors, and people putting gloves and masks on the sculptures around town. I spent a lot of time going around shooting those things, documenting those things. Think about all the things that happened over the past year. There was a point in time where when we started closing and everything, and I was, 4 months into this project, I looked at Nicole, I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. I should just stop, because it's going to be really difficult to keep doing this. And she's like, no, more than ever, you should complete this and document it and have it to be a part of it, because this is a once, you know, in a bad way, but in a good way, it's a once in a lifetime thing. My photography is not photojournalist. I don't consider myself a photojournalist in any way. Even though I shoot at national parks, I'm not there to document the park. That's not my thing. The street photography I'm doing in New York is the antithesis of street photography, you know, because I'm shooting pinhole and these long exposures, and it's not concentrating on the people like street photography does. The whole idea of like documenting something was strange in a way, and giving myself to that was even stranger.
Well, but I think it also kind of connects to some of your other work, like the work you've done in Lamy of abandoned places, right?
So
all of a sudden you're photographing places in Santa Fe that were not abandoned 2 days ago that are all of a sudden looking like
exactly
like Lamy.
Well, the thing is my business is right next to the brewery, so I'm used to that being this thriving center of Santa Fe. The Second Street Brewery is is a meeting place center of Santa Fe, and it's just always outside my door of my studio, and I'm always walking by the patio, and it's full of people, bustling with people and traffic coming down that alley. And when everything went to nothing, walking up and down that railway, it was eerie.
When that happened was when the gallery was on Guadalupe, so we were across the street from the boxcar. So same sort of thing, where me in the gallery with the doors locked and nothing happening at boxcar, which is about as weird as nothing happening at Second Street.
Right. Well, there would be no traffic. I mean, there was like a month, about 6 weeks, to where I would walk my dog. I walk my dog every day at lunch down the railway, all the way to the other rail station and back, almost every day. And that, there was nobody, there was no traffic, there was no, and I shot that rail station empty, in the middle of the day when you would have trains coming by. I made a point of shooting what was the last train that ran. All those things were really odd. I knew when the train was coming and going. So because I've shot it on many a times, I know, okay, it's coming at 4 o'clock. It's going this way at 4 o'clock. It's coming back at 4:30 or 4:45, because I've shot it so many times. Be at that station when it's usually everyone's going back to Albuquerque, getting on the train to go back to Albuquerque, and there's nothing, and the sign still said that the train was coming,
right?
Which was odd. After a while, about 2 or 3 weeks of shooting that, I had to quit. Sure. I had to move on. I had to move on and do something different. One of the cool things, my daily walk with my dog, I'm right there at Second Street Studios and the Lena Street Lofts. And you have so many artists that have studios in those places. And a lot of them took to decorating their windows with stuff, putting stuff in their windows about the vote, about Black Lives Matter, about COVID, about, and a lot of them started taking stuff that they were doing and posting it on a chain link fence out there by the railway. And I started shooting what was on that fence, whether it was pictures of people that were lost, that they had lost, political dissent in our country, all that. They would hang stuff on this chain link fence. So I have tons of pictures of that. No other time would you have seen that.
You had to shoot that. How are you not gonna?
Exactly. It's the thing about once I started shooting all these abandoned patios and stuff, there was no movement. You're shooting this long exposure, you're shooting a 4, 5, 6, 7 minute exposure, or nothing's moving. You have empty chairs, empty tables, and the only things that are moving around are the trees.
So that makes me think about that photograph I was asking you about earlier that was the ghost train photo you made in Laney pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah, that was shot last year. I like shooting out there because they have abandoned cars everywhere. The railway that went back and forth between Lamy, the train between Lamy and Santa Fe, and have the little drink car and the dining car and do all that. Well, that's not running anymore. And they have all the cars and the engines basically stored out there. So I go and shoot the cars and they move them all the time. That's why I keep going out there, is they're in different locations, different lighting sources. And then the old church, they set them up sometimes to where you can incorporate them with the church. I was out there one day and I had no idea when the Amtrak came and left. I heard the whistle of the Amtrak and I looked at my clock. It was 3 o'clock. Okay. This Saturday, 3 o'clock. And I picked a location to stand to see how far the train would pull up. And I was shooting a 4.5 pinhole at the time. The train pulled up pretty close and I was like, okay, the next time I'm going to be here and I'm going to stand there. So it was that one time and I got a good shot, but the next time I knew exactly, okay, 3 o'clock Saturday, this is where I have to be. This is where I want to stand. And this is the camera that I'm going to use, And the thing was, I timed from the time I heard the whistle to the time the train pulled up to me to how long it stopped when it left. And I timed it to be 5 minutes. Well, then that told me when to start the photograph, where to be, what kind of camera to use, when to start it. I had the station before the train comes, the light of the train coming to me, knew right where it was going to stop. I was right there, so it stopped right in front of me. Unloads and loads people for a little over a minute and then takes off. I knew that was going to be a good shot. And I shot that with a panoramic pinhole that shoots a 4x10 piece of film. I cut a piece of 8x10 in half and I put it around the back of that. And it's a box about this big. That's the one the anti-terrorist unit in New York City almost arrested me for shooting it at Yankee Stadium.
Right. Shooting your pinhole work, you've had a few situations, right?
The whole thing of me doing this project in New York, the street photography with the pinhole, how it started is I was in New York in 2012 for an exhibition I was doing there. I was in the middle of that project, shooting a picture every day that year. So I, was like, hey, I'm in New York. We're going to shoot on the street. We're going to go down. And I started shooting on the street. And the very first day, I was shooting down by the Chrysler building. I got off the train at Grand Central, walked to the Chrysler building. It was the morning. And there was this great reflection in the windows of the restaurant on the first floor of the Chrysler building of the building across the street. It has metal embossing all over the building. You looked up the Chrysler building and saw the reflection of the building behind you in the windows. Well, a guy came out of the Chrysler building and said, what are you doing, man? And I had my pinhole camera, my box, all taped up so there's no light leaks. And he goes, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm taking a picture of the reflection. I pointed everything out to him. And he's like, look, man, I appreciate what you're telling me. My boss told me to come and tell you that you have to go. You have to have a permit to be able to shoot the Chrysler building. I was like, hold on, man. Pull out my little copy of my photographer rights in New York City that basically says, as long as I'm on the sidewalk, it's public easement. I don't have to have a permit, blah, blah, blah. He's like, look, my boss told me that you got to go. So I'm going to walk to the end of the street. And by the time I turn around, you need to close up shop and leave. So I'm in the middle of like a 5-7 minute exposure and I'm about 3 minutes in. So I'm like, okay, man, take your time going down to the end of the block. The guy gets to the end of the block. I shut my shutter. I close up my tripod. I go to walk around the block to go head back to the Grand Central. And I start shooting on the other side. Mm-hmm. Here comes the guy. And he's like, I told you I'm going to have to, So I hop into Grand Central, get on a train, go to the other side of town. Well, I get to the East Side Park, 78 80th Street. I get there and they have the old dry docks of where they used to repair all the ships. Mm-hmm. And so I start shooting there. Department of Interior park guy comes and says, what are you doing? And I have to explain the whole thing. And he starts asking me the same questions the last guy did. And I go, well, that's the same thing that this last guy asked me. I pull up on my phone. This is where you can get this camera, the whole thing. Yeah. I bought this online. You can get this. You can buy this camera. Yeah. Well, what are you shooting for? Who are you shooting for? All these questions. I'm coming out of the park. There's these two guys sitting on a bench reading a newspaper, not even looking at me. I go to walk by him and the guy drops it in. He goes, hey, what is that? And starts asking me the same questions the last two guys asked me. The exact same questions. And gets to the point, well, who are you shooting for? Why, are you doing this commercially? Blah, 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 That went on for 2 days. And I met like 8 people and they kept asking me the exact same questions the last people did. And each person added another one. And they would all ask for my card, all asked who I was, what I was doing. And I finally said, look, man, how many of you guys am I going to have to go through before you think, I'm okay? And that's when they stopped. The next time I was harassed was when I was at Yankee Stadium the next year. And that was the time where the anti-terrorist unit surrounded me. I was shooting a 45-minute exposure under the subway. It's overhead there at Yankee Stadium. Come off the subway, you come down the stairs and go under the tracks to get to the stadium. Well, I thought that was the cool shot. The light filtering through the tracks, and there's Yankee Stadium. So I was there the year before, and I was like, well, I'm going to come back with this, panoramic pinhole, the same thing I shot the train shot with, but I was shooting it infrared. So it was like 45 minute to an hour exposure. Mm-hmm. And here I am under the train tracks out in front of Yankee Stadium on opening day with this huge camera on a tripod, all wrapped in black tape, standing in one place for like going on 45 minutes. Well, the security guys across the street at Yankee Stadium had got notice of me, and I could see them call their boss and him come and then point at me. And then he got on his little microphone, little handheld thing. And before you knew it, a white van pulled up next to me. And out the back came these anti-terrorist guys with machine guns and surrounded me. And the boss that called them in walked across the street, never said a word to me, walked straight up, looked at my camera, walked around it as I'm surrounded by the anti-terrorist guys, looked at the camera the whole bit. I never said a word to him. He never said a word to me. He shook his head, went like that, and they all jumped back in the van and took off.
They decided you were okay. You weren't.
They didn't say a word.
Wow.
And my friend that I was with we were going to the game. We had gotten a locker so I could put my camera in so we could go to the game. Yeah, he stood there in disbelief, just laughing at the whole thing.
One thing you probably don't get when you're shooting out in Shenandoah.
No. And it's always with the pinhole that you get that type of response. You get this,
the stranger.
You get this goofy, well, people don't even.
Or people just
and then you try to explain it. They don't understand it. The link, the big Ferris wheel there. I've shot over by that Ferris wheel a lot. And every time I've had casino people, what are you doing? Who are you shooting for? You can't be commercially shooting out here. I'm like, and then you have to go through the whole process of convincing them that you're an artist and you're shooting it for yourself. And, well, are you planning to show it? Are you planning to sell it? I'm like, well, if someone wants to buy it, sure.
Right. I'm not there yet. That's fine art versus commercial art. You're shooting it because you want to shoot it, not because.
Right. And they find that concept of shooting it because you want to be shooting it is so foreign. Yeah. My shot today, pinhole shot today, there's 2 streets on the way to the cabin. The street signs have always intrigued me, and at some point I'm going to use them in a project. The one I shot today, and this project's perfect for it. Today is the 30th, tomorrow's the 31st. Today I shot Faith Lane, and Faith Lane, the sign is only about 5-6 feet high. So it was buried in snow almost. And it's just bent to all hell because some truck or something has hit it. So it's like Faith Lane is beat up. So I figured, well, okay, I'm going to shoot Faith Lane on the 30th. And tomorrow I've got Hope Lane that I'm going to shoot on the 31st. That is a pristine sign. Well, of course, I'm out standing up to my knees in snow with my pinhole trying to get as close as I can to this street sign. And the lady that lives there comes out, what are you doing? I'm shooting 4-minute exposures. I'm halfway through my second shot. So I've only been there for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
10 at the most. She's coming out. She comes out of her house. What are you doing? Tried to explain to her what I'm shooting and why. And she just does not. And you're doing this for who? For a project that I've been working on. I've been waiting to shoot this one sign for the whole year for one day. And she just could not wrap her head around that I'm standing up to my knees in snow. It's 20 degrees out. And I'm trying to get a picture of your bent up street sign.
With this weird box.
Grab the phone, show her my website. I'm a professional photographer. I'm not shooting some video of your house or spying on you or anything like that. I'm just shooting.
Well, and if you were trying to spy on her, it would probably not be with a pinhole camera.
No,
right?
No. Well, she didn't believe. First of all, she didn't believe it was a camera.
Okay.
And then once I proved that it was a camera, well, why are you shooting this? Why would you want to shoot this? And I had to try to explain that it's part of this project and it's significant because of what it says and the year and it's like way over. And it goes back to like I spoke to you earlier about the guy in Shenandoah. Right. That the day I was leaving, I break out the 8x10 and I only had, so many film holders, so many sheets of film. I was shooting my last film holder for my 8x10 and I'm under this tree. He comes with all his digital equipment. Well, what do you get out of that? You know, it's the same thing that people are so far removed from it that they don't connect. There's no connection to that. Even your photographers.
But I mean, even just art making at all, when you really break it down, this act of painting, drawing, making photographs, people who are going out to do it, they're doing it just because they want to do it. And so some people might not understand that. And particularly in the case when you're standing in 3 feet of snow in a box covered in tape. What is this guy doing?
2 generations back, they have no idea what film is. They have no idea what an actual photograph is. Exposed by light, taken by light.
I've always felt like having an understanding of at least how film works is really important.
Oh, no question. If I ever taught or had a workshop or instruction in any way, first thing I would do is hand you a pinhole camera.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches you everything. It teaches you about the time it takes to expose. It teaches you to imagine your composition, to picture it in your mind's eye, because you're not looking through a viewfinder. Mm-hmm. You're having to imagine it and create it. The understanding of that time and motion and shadow and the movement of light and all those things, it's all incorporated in that camera. And if you can shoot a pinhole camera, you can shoot any camera. I
got to make some pinhole cameras in high school, and I loved them, but it was really frustrating because just the act of making the box light tight. Oh, yeah. I made a bunch that just didn't work at all.
I understand.
Do you have a favorite television show, movie?
I don't watch much TV except I'm a football fan, so it's the only time I really watch television, with the exception of movies. I'm a big movie buff. Part of my affinity towards the format that I shoot, the panoramic format that I shoot, goes back to Lawrence of Arabia, spaghetti westerns, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West. Those were all like my favorite movies growing up when I was a kid, when I was real young, and had a huge impact on me visually and the way I shoot today. That format, that panoramic format, goes back to those 2 movies in particular. Well, Lawrence of Arabia, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, Patton, Jaws, all those that were filmed in the big, long, wide format, 70 millimeter format. Those movies were so influential on me that it really made me want to capture things in that way, in that large, wide vista format. And the way I first started doing it, all I used to shoot was an Army field camera. I had a Canonet that was a press camera, 35 millimeter press camera for the military. I used to shoot brackets. I would overlap each photograph about a third. So I would sit there and go bam, 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 and work myself around the vista. And then I would print them out and layer them to where they matched up and stitch them together by the photograph. That was how I did it until I had a panoramic camera. It's funny when I watch those movies now. Like, I'm one of these people that will watch a movie if I really like it. I'll watch it numerous times. Good, Bad, and the Ugly, I watched it again the other night. It's probably, I've seen it probably somewhere near between 200 and 300 times.
A lot of my favorite movies, every time I watch it, there's something new I get out of it.
No question. No question. Especially from a photography point of view, you know, a photographic point of view. The way that that movie is filmed, those old spaghetti westerns, the close-ups and the cameraman, I mean, was amazing. Sergio Leone, the director, was constantly challenging. That guy had the hardest job. I mean, close-ups that are right on people and still being able to see every detail in a guy's face and then 50 yards in a distance, the guy that he was facing off against, you know, you could focus and see both were in complete focus, you know, amazing stuff. And Lawrence of Arabia, the vista in that movie, the of the sand out in the desert, and you know, and then when I was at Death Valley, and then you got sand dunes and everything everywhere, and these huge vistas, it was like drew me right back to that and influences. Yeah, I have a handful of movies that I've watched so many times. I listen to a lot of music. I'm a huge music person. At a very young age, I was handed all my mom, dad, all their vinyl. I listened to all their collections, started listening to my own music based off of that. For a very young age, I was listening to the Rolling Stones, and I'm a huge Rolling Stones fan. I was a huge Rolling Stones fan long before I was a U2 fan. That kind of spawned into the whole Zeppelin and metal phase that I went through. And in all that, I'm a huge fan of jazz. I love jazz, and I still collect vinyl. I still have all my vinyl from when I was a kid. I still have all the vinyl that was given to me. Still am collecting vinyl to today. More today, it's filling in holes of collections of jazz, or a jazz artist that I really like, or I like reggae a lot. I listen to a lot of Bob Marley, Peter Tosh.
And we have a few good vinyl shops in Santa Fe.
Yeah, it's actually surprising. It's so funny. The appreciation of vinyl is so connected in a way to the appreciation of analog photography. An audiophile understands the whole analog thing, whether it be, you know, through music or film or what. They understand that more so than anyone else. I mean, I have so many people and so many friends that are like, well, why don't you just download it? And you try to explain the difference of the sound of an album on a hi-fi stereo system compared to MP3 that you download, that the quality, it's night and day. It's once again back to that disconnect that people have because they don't know better. You know, they don't have that reference. So you give them that reference or remind them of it. I had a friend that came up here, and we had gone and shot at Chaco, and we came up here to stay the night before we headed back to Santa Fe. It had been 50 years since he had heard a vinyl record. And I opened a bottle of wine, poured him a glass, sat him down in front of the stereo, and I said, who do you want to hear? He said, well, I'm a big Santana fan. I'm like, okay. Go and pull the Santana out. I put it on, and he was just floored. He's like, I can't remember hearing that way since college. And I was like, well, because last time you listened to vinyl was when you were in college,
right?
And you don't realize the difference until you hear it again. How just absolutely magnificent it is in comparison.
I mean, music is compressed now, which didn't used to be the situation. So there's people who grew up when music was not compressed at all to music was just a digital file.
One of the coolest things to me of growing up when I was a kid, going into the record store every week to see what new was coming out and to look at the album covers. I'm probably as influenced by album covers as I am any art that ever was. I mean, when I was, that feeling of going into a record store and going through albums and seeing an album cover, not even knowing who the band was, but that album cover was so cool.
It's like going to an art gallery, right?
Yeah. And there's thousands of them. And, you know, that was one of the coolest experiences ever. And kids have no idea what that was, what that is, and what that's like now. And that was hugely influenced. I found so many different bands based on just going, wow, that's a cool album cover. I'm buying this album. And I came across tons of duds, of course. So many things that I learned just by those experiences, and how much new music I learned, how much difference of looking at photography, looking at art and design and all those things that of that time, pop culture. I mean, it was largely centered around that. I listen to music from the time I get to the lab to the time I leave. 12 to 14 to 15 hours a day, I'm listening to music.
So outside of you two, you could have the original painting or like a lithograph from an album cover. You could have anyone ever
Outside of you two.
Outside of you two. I know you. I know you'd be picking you two.
There's several U2 ones that come to mind immediately. Here, 1A, 1B is "Let It Bleed" by the Rolling Stones. I love the birthday cake with the little figurines of each of the band on the birthday cake. I love that shot. I also love the Warhol Sticky Fingers cover of the. I mean, that's classic. Velvet Underground Warhol, the Bananas is absolutely classic. London Calling, The Clash, that photograph of The Clash on London Calling. So the artwork on the Hendrix covers, the real far out, that was indicative of that time. The Santana, Abraxas, a mural type of LA look on Abraxas of all the different imagery that's going on that. Those are a few. Those are a handful. I mean, I can think of a lot more.
I mean, it's interesting in the different ways that we're exposed to visual art.
I always thought the coolest thing about that and about music at that time was the concept of the album. Mm-hmm. And when you bought an album, you had the cover, which was always great, but then you had the gatefold that would open to this other thing, and then the whole concept that was an album, like the song, it was a concept. Pink Floyd, like you were talking about Pink Floyd, I mean, the whole conceptual backing of those albums, song to song. I love "Wish You Were Here" is probably my favorite Pink Floyd album. That photograph of on the cover of the two men shaking hands, the one guy on fire, that is like one of the all-time classics. But then you open the gatefold and you see the picture of them, the band picture of that is like phenomenal. And you would take out like the sleeve cover, and the sleeve cover had its own artwork to it. All those details.
Right. Like an object within an object within another object.
Led Zeppelin, physical graffiti that they had all the windows of the building, and the inset of the cover of the album could go either way and give you different things in the windows of the buildings, no matter which way you had it in the album. I mean, those things, the Doors, LA Woman, I have the original of that, and it has a cellophane print of their faces, and the sleeve that goes in is yellow, so that provides the yellow background to their faces. And if you look at it in the right light, it actually looks like a hologram. I mean, that was being done in the 1971. And I mean, those type of things just don't exist anymore. And I mean, that attention to detail, to selling that kind of concept in music, those things are all gone.
Which is why it is amazing that there are still record stores and that people are still producing vinyl and even apparently cassette tapes. They're still making those. There's enough of a demand.
And then you have all these limited pressings that are numbered and stamped, that are for audiophile collectors, that range anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars. And then once they're sold out, you're going thousands to $10,000s of dollars for, and that's just amazing. And for something that was considered a dead form of listening.
When we meet Homer, he was repeating after you earlier. How often does he do that?
He mostly copies my laugh. Like if I laugh, he mimics my laugh. But if I'm on the phone or on something like this, he'll mimic the cadence of my voice. He doesn't talk per se, like he won't really pronounce something. If I get to talking, like he'll start copying like the cadence of my voice.
Does he have a favorite album?
He has people that he can't stand. Electric Dylan, nah, he doesn't like it. Springsteen, anything of the like real whiny Springsteen.
Yeah.
He doesn't do good with real whiny people. Likes classical music. He likes the Vivaldi, likes the jazz, as long as it's not like progressive jazz. He's not much for heavy metal.
He a bird, not really being into metal.
Nine Inch Nails, he's not. I'm a big Nine Inch Nails fan, and he's just not a Nine Inch Nails guy.
Does he like reggae?
Yes, he likes Marley a lot. Likes Marley quite a bit. Doesn't mind the blues. Listens to blues, stuff like that. But something about Bob Dylan's whine is he has a problem with.
So, of all you've traveled a lot of different places to photograph. Of all the places that you've been or haven't been, is there a first place you would choose to go if you could just go anywhere tomorrow?
Wow, that's a good question. I would have to separate it into places I've been and places I haven't. Mm-hmm. If there was places I could go to photograph tomorrow that I haven't been, I've always wanted to go to Patagonia. And I've always wanted to go to Machu Picchu, Easter Island. Those places just kind of fit my panoramic, the infrared. Iceland, I've seen a lot of stuff recently that makes me go, wow, I really need to go to Iceland. Yeah. I've been to a lot of places in Europe and stuff, but I've never been to Rome or Paris, and I've always wanted to go to both of them. Places that I've been and I'm dying to go back and photograph. I had an opportunity to go to Alaska several times when I was younger. Hunting and fishing experiences with my grandfather. Remember the places we went. I would love the opportunity to go back to those to photograph now. In the United States, one of the parks that I'm dying to shoot and try to get a residency at is Acadia up in Maine. I've always wanted to shoot there. One that I've been and dying to go back to is Yellowstone. I would love to go shoot Yellowstone again in the fall and heading into winter. I've shot it always, and I've always been there in the spring, like late spring at the beginning of the season. I've seen a lot of stuff that's been done in the fall and the early winter that's really intriguing to me. If I ever go back, I'm just going to spend a week following a herd and just stay like with a herd of buffalo and just follow it and just shoot buffalo and shoot nothing else. That's kind of one of the things that's kind of on my list. I've never been to Yosemite, so it's one of those places that, because of all the icons that have shot there, got to go at some point and immerse myself into it. It's a natural.
I've been feeling that myself. Edward Bateman, he's a photographer we've been showing recently. I don't know if you've caught wind of him. He'd always wanted to go to Yosemite, but had never been, and he lives in Salt Lake City. So he 3D printed Yosemite, and he's been photographing it from his kitchen table during the pandemic.
Really?
Yeah. Go to the homepage of our website and click on online exhibition. Yeah, he's amazing.
Anytime I travel with all the film equipment and everything that I have to drive most of the time. I can't fly with it. And then like when I go to New York and fly to New York, I have to FedEx all my film. They say they don't nuke it, but they do. They over X-ray it all the time. And I mean, I see it when I do other people's stuff, and I can't afford to take that chance with 4x5 and 8x10 film that it costs, $5 a sheet, $4 a sheet.
Yeah, just for the sheet of film. That's not even having plotted or.
Yeah. So for this foreseeable future, all my concentration is on places here. The residencies seem like a great idea to me to keep doing at least one a year. My goal is to keep doing at least one a year.
Well, and there's just so much to explore in the Southwest.
Oh, yeah.
Generally, I've been here for over 20 years, and there's so many places I've not been to yet. And
oh, yeah. Well, it's endless. It really is. I mean, it's endless. In the four corners there alone, 4 states, you could spend a lifetime. Ongoing thing I have with the Colorado River and documenting the Colorado River from top to bottom. And it started with commissions that I was doing for the state of Nevada, and I'm still working on side projects on it on my own. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that alone, just following the tributaries of the Colorado River and following the Colorado River, like I did the headwaters again this year and did it all the way down to from the springs and the headwater spring all the way down to the river.
I think that's, yeah, it's a reminder. It's like there's so many amazing places to explore out there, but there's so much kind of almost in our backyards.
Oh, no question. No question. It's a great thing about living in this part of the country. Trust me, I lived on the other coast and it's not that way. When you're living on the East Coast, it's so different. And that was one of the driving factors in us moving back, was that I was, from a creative standpoint, just, it wasn't the same. At least for me, it wasn't. My creative draw was, it's not like, it was only when I went on vacation did I see the things that I was really attracted to and drawn to, where now that you live there, it's truly, okay, Saturday I'm done working, I could go ride over to Lamy and find all kinds of stuff to get into. Oh, I could go up, up the canyon and, up 285 and find all kinds of things to get into.
Right. Or even if you're just running around by the train tracks by
exactly. There's just all kinds of opportunities everywhere.
Well, Cody, thank you so much for joining us on Art in the Raw, and Homer being on the show. You're the first bird on the show. I assume we would know if he hated my voice.
No, we would know. He'd be biting me.
He's okay with me? Okay.
Yeah, he is.
Cool. Well, thank you, Homer. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching Art in the Raw. If you've enjoyed the conversation, keep the inspiration going. Please like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends. This is the last episode of 2020. We've got more coming in 2021. How crazy is that to hear? 2021. It's happening. Hopefully it's good. I'm feeling good.
I think it'll be better.
Well, thanks so much. Talk soon.
All right, Ann. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.